Honourable Darren Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Labour opposition will be supporting the first reading of this Simon Power Bill, the Electoral Administration Amendment Bill number 2. And there are so many things to say about the different aspects of our electoral law. My colleagues, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell and Charles Chauvel, have already touched on those events. I want to acknowledge the previous speaker, Hekia Parata, because I think she would be offended if I didn't make reference to her as the speaker following her speech. I know that despite her natural shyness, she will set this to one side to allow me to make a couple of comments. I note that on Saturday Labour won the second by-election of this parliamentary term, which is a great thing indeed, to see that the record for Labour is 2 out of 2 already served. And matters of electoral administration are very, very important to this. In fact, if I was to be unkind to the honourable member, I would say that her claim that she doesn't do runner-up is not a line she can keep on using. This is now the third time she's come as the runner-up in an electoral race. So I think she'll have to use a new strapline for her campaigns. I'm sorry, I can't hear the member. Her own colleagues are drowning her out. Oh, well, that can be achieved. I can deliver that for the member if she chooses. but I won't. I just note that I commiserate with her because her own personal share of the vote fell by almost 3,000. Almost 3,000 fewer people voted for her on Saturday than had two years ago. I almost wondered whether Jonathan Coleman had been giving some advice to that particular campaign. I'm very pleased to hear the government now saying there was a low turnout on Saturday, because I hadn't heard that from the spin of the national government. But now the candidate for Mana is saying that one of the reasons she lost 3,000 votes on Saturday was because there was a low turnout. So I acknowledge the member and I agree with the argument that she is putting. I think that was a very useful thing indeed. And she will be grateful to the Prime Minister for the extraordinary amount of time he spent in the electorate and the predictions he was making, because it was unusual to see him there on Saturday night. None of us thought we'd see him in Mana on Saturday evening, and he made the decision to be there while there were, of course, other matters of state on his mind that we're all thinking of him about in that respect. But he was there. He obviously had some expectations that did not come to pass. But anyway, that's the way it went, and so I'm glad the member got the chance to speak about these matters of electoral administration. A far more honourable showing, I must say, on Saturday than what we saw just a year ago in the electorate of Mount Albert, except to say, and I'm very critical of Jonathan Coleman for many reasons, and a lot of them, of course, are shared by his own colleagues, so I feel in great company in that respect. But I must admit, I'm given credit for this one thing. On election night, he and Melissa Lee showed up to concede in person. I was very surprised that the member Hekia Parata didn't appear in person to concede defeat. I thought she would have done that, so I must admit I was a bit surprised about that, because when all is said and done, she is a good person, and I thought that might have been a classy touch for what was a very clean campaign. But however, having said that, I want to touch on other matters of this bill, because this is an important bill, and having poked a little bit of borax at the National Party, I want to give praise to Simon Power on this 23rd day of November 2010, one day after the 22nd of November, and that will be important to the Minister for reasons known to him, because I think that Simon Power has managed this process with a great degree of integrity, and he has sought to genuinely balance a degree of bipartisan cooperation to the extent so that can be expected. There are some genuine differences across the aisle here about the way these matters should be handled, and the balance of the package that the Minister has developed and is delivering by way of two other bills we will debate on Thursday, and this bill here tonight, are not perfect from the Labour Party's point of view. I know that the National Party don't think they're perfect either, but they are a balance, and I think we've got ourselves back into a very credible position where we are trying to have laws for electoral purposes that, even if we don't regard them as perfect, both sides, or most sides, can live with. And I do have to say that that's been a position that Simon Power has brought here through his ministerial role that we do appreciate. So I definitely want to put that on the record, that we are grateful to him for that. As other speakers have said, including Mr Bakshi, who very eloquently pointed out, this is stage 2 of a 2-stage reform package. He made that point quite firmly, and does make changes to how the new Electoral Commission can operate. Now, we've of course had an Electoral Commission previously, but this does coordinate the different branches of that commission into a way that we haven't seen before. And I think almost it's not quite a one-stop shop, but that model of having one agency that will be able to deliver on our electoral laws and will be able to give the advice, the support, the guidance, and importantly the information about our electoral system, I think will be quite an important thing. And so the Labour opposition does understand why the government have done this. I think all political parties who have, regardless of their philosophy, those who have stumped up on the campaign trail, have all at different points felt some degree of frustration at some of the duplication that has occurred in our processes. And so being able to streamline that has been a phrase that I think all parties have used to explain their support for this bill. Being able to streamline that, I think, will obviously have some reduction in terms of the cost of running elections, but more to the point, will provide more clarity for political parties and for parliamentary candidates than has necessarily been the case in the past. Now, this is a staged process, so although the Commission now exists, Mr Chauvel spoke about the fact that there are 2 members of the Commission appointed and that there's a 3rd member to come on board, and that should be something that should take place as quickly as possible. And again, the Minister has been very generous in his consultation on that. Once that's set up, I think it's going to be quite important for them to assume these responsibilities as soon as can take place. I must admit, I am surprised that the Chief Registrar of Electors, those roles don't fall into this new commission until 2012, which is still quite some time away. That takes us beyond it takes us beyond the Botany by-election, and it takes us beyond the general election of 2011 as well. So there's going to be quite some time before these reforms do all take place. But there's a roadmap for it, and I think that's quite a useful thing that has been signalled to us. I want to pick up, sir, on some of the points that the Justice and Electoral Select Committee made, because I think they focused on this quite heavily after the election. We've got into we have a convention, I guess, that after every general election, that committee does conduct an inquiry into the election. There are submissions from different political parties. Most of them are from the those who are active actors, I guess you'd say, in the election process. And some years nothing really happens with those reports, but this year I was very pleased to see that the multi-party committee that inquired into that has made some recommendations that the government has picked up. And those have been outlined by Leanne Dalzell and indeed Hekia Parata just mentioned a number of those as well around the immigration information that is available. I think moving down the path of the e-enrolment is going to be a very important thing, particularly when people find through moving around and so on and so forth, they can easily be dropped off the roll, which none of us like to see happen. I think the reforms that were made when Tim Barnett was the chairman of the Select Committee to assume that people would be on the roll, that people would be reinstated on the roll after every general election. Members will recall that after every election, everyone was wiped from the roll and forced to re-enroll, and that was a crazy system. So it's been much better to have that reform whereby people are assumed to continue as electors unless there is a reason for them not to. So I'm pleased to see that has continued. We're lucky in New Zealand that we do have very high levels of enrolment in an optional voting system. That is an important element to make sure people do get on the electoral roll and do exercise their right to vote. In Australia, of course, with a compulsory voting system, that isn't as important, where there is almost 100% participation in elections, and I know there's a state election in Victoria this weekend. Once again we will see an electoral system that works very, very credibly as that one does. So we're supporting this Select Committee, and for those reasons that this is a useful piece of legislation, and we do congratulate the Minister of Justice, Simon Power, on the way he's conducting this process. Thank you, sir.